G'day guys, back with the Outer Circle. I know it's been a good week since the last video, but I just needed to collect some thoughts I've had on the Horus Heresy. I put up a poll just asking what people wanted me to talk about next. General thoughts on Horus Heresy 2.0, whether to do pre-recorded, well, this video, no shock, whether to do it live, which I thought people would have loved, the chance to chat live one-on-one, ask questions. No, not really interested. It turns out people weren't too interested at all in that. And the other option was talking about Psychic Phase in 2.0. And one of the comments made a really good point, which is, you know what? Until we have it in stone, let's not really talk about it. I think they raise a pretty good point, so that's why you're getting this video. Not because I don't listen to the polls, but because it's a pretty good point. I don't know all the psychic powers are set in stone. I think that what's in the rulebook is, and how they function, but it'd be great to just go over them as a whole, because there are Legion-specific psychic powers for several Legions. And I think the way they've been done is a lot better than what we currently have. It's fantastic, in fact, compared to what we have. And it was a relatively easy change, so very similar, in fact, to a previous system I developed, which, you know, it's pretty good. I must have been in the ballpark. Anyway, that aside, 2.0 Heresy and Games Workshop, where do I begin? Well, the first thing I want to talk about is the price and the box set. Because to get onto price, value, desirability, you need to discuss what actually happens when Games Workshop does box sets. Because they have a pattern. You see, what they usually do is they go for one of two things. Either they bring out an entirely new kit, and they put old models in there, or they bring out a box which is full of old models, and they add one character or two in there to trigger the new thing must-have response in people's brains. Think, for example, Castellan Crow, in a box with a whole bunch of old Grey Knights. If you're a Grey Knight player, the only way to get him is to buy that box. So, as I noted in previous community post, that's fine, but let's acknowledge it for what it is. Remember, for all the jokes about it being just a toy, guys, this is a billion-dollar company. I can guarantee you they sit in those board meetings and talk about the product, not like it's a toy. They talk about the product releases the way any other large multinational does about any of their major projects. It's life or death. Jobs are on the line. They need to maximize margin and want to know how to target multiple purchases from the same user, as well as bringing users from other systems across. They don't want one-time purchases, they want multiple repeat purchases. That's why all these influencers who haven't fought the fight that this channel has for 6 years suddenly all have an opinion about the Horus Heresy, because they're trying to get those people to bring their communities over and get those people to buy a product they're not interested in. Now, the Horus Heresy game is 475 Australian, and is a great value proposition for Games Workshop fans. Now, I say Games Workshop fans, because I do not believe it is great value, and not just for the simple cost, but for more than that. So hear me out here. Yes, cost is a factor. If the company pays $2 to make something, charges you $20, and then says, you know what, I'll discount you, I'll give it to you for $14, they haven't given you a great deal, just less of a screwing. That's the obvious point. The less obvious point, the part that concerns me, is that the box does contain either unnecessary units, or units I don't think are really viable in a starter box. Namely the Spartan. 2 power armored characters. When you have, say, Terminators in the box, it would have been wise to put a Terminator character in. 1 tactical squad, too many, it can be argued. You probably could use that squad as, say, Legion Heavy Support, or a Tactical Support squad, or a Breacher squad, or basically anything but 4 squads of bolt guns. Of course, you could run them as 2 20-man squads, but it's not super common because they're really awkward to use on the battlefield. They take up a huge bit of space, very easy to hit with pie plates. Yeah. So right there, we could probably bring the box down to probably 2/3 or even half of what it's being sold at just by taking a couple of things out of it. For the UK, obviously this doesn't apply so much because at their price point, it's tolerable. But here in the colonies, the price is artificially 50% higher than the exchange rate because, well, greed. Don't try to defend it in the comments either. I completely debunked it in every single video I've ever done on it. The whole reason they charge more is because they can. So, anyway, ignoring that point, what would a fair price be? Well, I have to get back to that later because there's more to discuss first. So, box sets going forward. I made 2 predictions. Not 1, but 2. And it's based on years of knowing the company and considering the fact, I guessed basically before we had any price data exactly what the Legion books would cost, and I got it right. I guessed the box game would be between 450 and 500 Australian. It came in bang on in the middle of that. So I was right again. And basically I was Nostradamus when it came to the Black Templars. I not only predicted the units that were coming, I even got the unit names right over a year out. That was hilarious. And I'm therefore cautiously confident in my predictions. Or I'm a witch. That's your call, viewer. Now, my first thought, keeping in mind their previous sets, is that they'll likely do a Mechanicum box late this year, with limited new plastics, choosing mostly to bulk it out by porting over 40k plastics, large chunks of that 40k Mechanicum line, into 30k, rather than trying to take Forge Worlds miniatures and convert them into plastic. So I'm quietly confident they will do maybe Thalax and a Magos, but I don't see them touching Domitar or Vorax. And I'm pretty confident the Mechanicum book will contain all the factions featuring Cybernetica, Tagmata, Reductor, and I think they're going to include Dark Mechanicum as another sub-faction, as opposed to filling out a whole book on its own. They almost certainly won't give you Mechanicum versus Custodes, which is what a few people say, like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we got Mechanicum versus Custodes? No, they won't do that, because then you'll pick one. You'll pick either Custodes or Mechanicum, and that means if you're picking one, you can't collect both because you can't afford both simultaneously. So what Games Workshop will do is they will try and save the Custodes for a later date because they want to hype you up for new things and get you to drop the Marines you bought in June, the mech that you buy in October, and instead focus on the next thing. I also sort of think that the next year we'll probably see another 30k expansion. Or I should say the first proper 30k expansion, which I think will be like the Warzone books in 40k. And it'll be a campaign for some world on the way to Terra. It'll be a full colour book with additional Heresy units and rules. I'm guessing probably Zone Mortalis rules or hazardous environments or, something like that. Something to add a little bit of extra flavour to the game. It'll contain plastic breaches, which most likely will be an upgrade kit for existing miniatures, probably, hopefully, Mark III. It will include plastic assault marines. I dare say, Mark VI. Maybe something else. But I think Mark VI because then they can combine them with the existing plastic kits and make despoilers and yada yada. I also think it will contain a plastic Tartarus Terminator character. I think it will potentially contain a vehicle, such as a plastic land speeder or a bike squadron. So, how do I come to these conclusions? Well, Sons of Horus Imperial Fists are being overdone now. They've got so many characters, all the paint jobs, all the artwork is them, so they won't be in it. I'll say Blood Angels and Death Guard, because they're both popular forces. Games Workshop has favoured both factions previously as poster children for 40k. White Scars, which are the other Siege of Terror faction, they're very niche out of the loyalists. Less people play them than Blood Angels and Imperial Fists, obviously. And I don't foresee any of the Shattered Legions like Salamanders getting love here. And I don't see Ultramarines or Dark Angels or Space Wolves being included yet. For the Traders, Word Bearers, well, they're red. That looks no good on the box opposite Blood Angels, ditto for the Thousand Suns. Alpha Legion, Night Lords, Iron Warriors, they don't exist in Games Workshop's eyes. As per their numerous releases those legions have got since 2003. Nothing. Emperor's Children are a more distant possibility, but the fact they've got a bunch of characters lately, special characters between Sultavitz, Lucius the Eternal, I don't really see them going that route. And they are less popular, with Games Workshop at least, than the other two options, which is World Eaters and Death Guard, both of which are incredibly popular. Now, since the World Eaters are going to get a 40k codex, that will compete with 30k World Eaters. And since I can only assume they don't want people buying 40k stuff for 30k and vice versa, because they want you to buy stuff for both systems, rather than have you choose between them, they will instead, because they're too similar, make Death Guard the choice. So, box set will give the Death Guard the Tartarus Terminator, and he'll be a plastic HQ, because they already have a plastic Cataphracti, so they need a new niche. And I joked on a post that it'll be some dumb name like Tarquinius Scabbysack, as is tradition, and feature heavily in a new campaign novel, where it turns out he was actually a big mover in the Death Guard, the right hand of Mortarion, actually. He was there in the background the whole time, guiding the Primarch's actions. You know, those terrible stories. Even though you've never heard of him, he was there, trust me. But he will also be generic enough that any Legion can use the model, just like Tweedledee and Tweedledum coming out in the current box. Funny enough, though, I'm okay with that, because rather than ruining another legacy character like they did with the Plastic Ahriman in the Prospero box, and the terrible tie-in novel, which is usually lame, it's actually a better way to introduce stuff into the universe, because it's a big sandbox with hundreds of thousands of Legionnaires, so having these brand new individual captains appear out of nowhere that aren't all named, sure, why not? Add one. Now, the campaign. The campaign will take place on some random world that nobody really knows, because it's easy to slot in some fresh copyright-protected IP. I'm going to call this world Scathus 4, because why not? It'll be one of those big battles you never heard of, kind of like Beta Garmin, and it gives them a blank slate, essentially. They can say that, you know, Blood Angels fought Death Guard on this world. This is right before the Death Guard did the final jump that turned them into pustule men. That'll be the thing. So, I'll say I'm not even mad about it. It's the reality of the business, and they'll take that approach. It obviously works for them, it's the formula they use, and they do it in both their other mainline systems, 40k and Sigmar. And the release cycle and the release timeline for box sets, that's exactly the same as what they do in Necromunda. So again, I accept it. But to go back to an earlier point, price and what it should cost. What upsets me is paywalling content ludicrously behind day one paywalls for long periods of time. This is what I term a major issue, and I have done so for several years, going right back to, I think it was Forge Fame, where it was Mechanicum versus Necrons, wherein the company forces your hand instead of allowing the market to dictate the terms, which is unhealthy as a customer-company relationship. In my mind, you should be able to purchase any individual item, be it book, model, dice, whatever, separate to a box game on day one, but you pay a premium price point for it. That's fair. You shouldn't feel forced into buying what you don't need and then having to justify why it's a good deal. And I often see people trying to dress it up with statements like, oh, you know, I could sell the other miniatures and make my money back. Fine, you look after you, but I don't want to buy the new 30k box, as an example, and many other veterans don't either. Many people do. It's just the way things go. But for those of us who already have full forces, or maybe we're doing something else like Mechanicum or Demons of the Ruinstorm or Custodes, the box has very little value to us if we're not interested in the Space Marine style of gameplay. Or because I've already got a Space Marine army whose playstyle I am interested in, those models don't sync up with that. That's a problem, because it's a lot of money. I just want the rules, but unfortunately the rulebook is now tied into a $475 starter set. Australian. I need to buy that box and at least one of the two $120 Legiones Astartes books on day one to play a Marine force in Horus Heresy. I need to buy both for proper reviews and content for people coming to this channel for real 30k advice. Does that seem fair to anyone? Ignore me for a moment, just think of the other players, like Mechanicum. They want rules for the game. Why should it be paywalled behind such an expensive book, only for the book to come later? And I mean, hey, if they drop the rule book on day one, come to this video, tell me I was wrong, totally cool with it, respect it. In fact, I'll praise it, and I'll say I was wrong. But I don't see that happening, because I haven't seen the price for it. I've seen a price for everything else. $120 for a Legiones book, you know, nearly 50, I think it's $55 or something for Ahriman. It's disgusting. But does this seem fair to anyone? Because it doesn't seem good to me. And we can generate excuses, people do all the time, about how it's better for Games Workshop and their bottom line, they're a business, they've got shareholders, they blah, 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 blah. What about respect for ourselves and our bottom line, guys? Does anyone ever look at that angle? Alright. In that case, let's look at it from another angle. Many of the toxic positivity crowd, don't worry, that video's coming, they'll point out how it's a net bonus that at least models are moving to plastic. That we should be thankful more people are entering the game. That's good. Hey, I agree with that. It's true. Totally 100% verifiably true. So don't take my coming statement as me hating the plastics or new players, as is so often portrayed by my detractors. No, the problem I'm seeing is sustainability. Because if you want a healthy and enduring hobby, guys, why would you charge a person $595 as essentially the lowest possible barrier for entry into the game? That's a starter box and the rules for either Loyalist or Traitor Legions. Not both. And most certainly not any of the hobby equipment designed or the more nuanced stuff that people need to play the game. So this is out of reach of kids. $595, you're well past console price as an entry point into the system, and Heresy is a big game. You're not going to, look, think back to that first point I made earlier about the Spartan. The extra power on my HQ, the 4 tactics were being pointless. This is where the problem really rears its ugly head, because to make a viable force on the table, they need to turn that 4th squad into heavy or special weapons. And what about World Eaters? No chain swords yet for you guys, no chain axes either. So, bayonets, use those, have fun. No. None of that is healthy for the game. It's not healthy for the retention of players or bringing people in. The barrier to entry is simply too high. The price point is too high. It's going to make the game only marginally easier to break into than the original Heresy. The fact that kit's in plastic is no help in that regard. And for me, that's not good enough. So call it salt, call me always Mr. Negative, but please explain how I'm wrong here. Explain who is able to foot that high a barrier to entry bill. Because making the game in plastic is great from a hobbying perspective, but it doesn't solve literally any of the other problems that the game system has. Price is still the #1 limiting factor, and rules, well, Games Workshop always messes up the rules in some capacities. That's hardly a selling point. So basically, I'm left with prices. Now, overall, I don't hate 2.0, but I don't overly like it either. And not because it's different. I hate that argument. It's really dumb, and people who do that, who use that argument, you just can't adapt to change. They're stripping all nuance away from the adult debate. I'm fine with change. I'm praising some mechanics. I'm like, psychic power's awesome. Warlord traits, awesome. I'm fine with dreadnoughts with wounds. But I despise, and I've said it for 5 years, how much I despise it. I hate change for the sake of change. And many of the changes to stats and rules in 2.0 are not a net improvement over 7th edition 40k. And that's the very problem I had with 8th edition 40k, that the company repeatedly shifts the problems sideways instead of resolving them. They start fixating on things that weren't a problem and didn't need a change. And I'll die on that hill. I'll die on the hill that 7 inches of movement is just necessary. Narrative excuses. That's what they are, excuses. They exist to justify it. But narrative also has to take a back seat sometimes to game design. And 6-inch movement on infantry kept the system very simple. You just, alright, all my infantry move 6 inches, how easy. Everything's rated, revolving around that, rated to it, great. But now you're going to have units that go 7, some that go 8, here and there. It's just going to confuse people. Because instead of the vaunted streamlining everyone wants to talk about, it's actually achieving the opposite. But hey, people will praise it. The community always praises these ideas until they don't. They praised formations. They praised Decurions. Then they didn't. They praised command points and stratagems. Until they didn't. Well, guess what? I've been playing since 1993. I was 5 years old. I can read rules. When I make up my mind now, I feel pretty ironclad in that decision because I've had 29 years almost of experience in this hobby. And with that experience in mind, I'll say this. Every edition should be better than the last. Not perfect, just better. And 2.0 does not feel better. It feels like they tackled half of the problems version 1 had, but they left half of the problems untouched. You got the same missions, some of those weren't very good. You've got the same fortifications. In fact, what they did to fortifications is essentially made them even more miserable. You got basically the same allies and allies matrix and how that relates to one another. On top of that, they modified things that nobody complained about or found terrible solutions to problems when, well, better solutions already existed. What it gets right, it gets really right. And I can respect that, and I'll defend that. But what it gets wrong, well, it doesn't get a free pass on it. 2.0 isn't a better Horus Heresy game, no. I think it's simply another Horus Heresy game. You know what? Maybe that's good enough. Anyway, please debate all of those many points that I've droned on about in the comments below. Sorry to take up 20 minutes of your life, guys, but I hope you got something out of it. And please, I am really curious to hear what you guys think. Because, as I always say, I'm not the arbiter of right and wrong. I can't tell you what the truth is, only the truth as I see it. It is up to you to read these rules, play those games, come up with your own experiences, and validate your own experiences. Don't rely on me to tell you how to live your life, because I know as much as you, the end of the day. I'm another person, 100% equal with you. Don't forget that. Back to the outer circle. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all next time.